All right, welcome everybody to another edition of Deconversion Stories. I'm your host, Neil, the 604 Atheist, and today I am chatting with the lovely Faye, the Most Gracious. Faye is an ex-Muslim, is that correct?
Yeah.
All right, and we're going to get into how that all came about, her leaving the faith behind and becoming the atheist activist and a really good voice for apostasy as she is today. So I do have links to follow her on Twitter if you aren't already, and also to sub to her channel, which, by the way, I thought I had already subbed to and realized that I had not hit that red button. So I did that today just to remedy that mistake. Because I've already seen some of your videos. So I guess in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I've already subbed or something, because they would come up in my algorithm from time to time. So anyway, Faye, let's take us back to, I guess, the early days when you sort of were still a believer, and what led you to becoming the activist that you are today, like the first sorts of things that you started realizing were nonsense or bullshit, and kind of, the dominoes kind of fall and you find your way out of it.
Yeah. Well, my early days is a little bit complicated because there were loads of different stages of my life where I felt like my relationship with religion changed. So when I was a little kid, like before, like I turned 10 or 11, my family weren't practicing at all. Like my father didn't pray. My mother was quite religious, but she was quite personally religious. She never really imposed anything on me.
Okay.
We would go to the comparison to Christianity would be like a Sunday school, but it was for, learning Quran and learning Arabic and things like that.
Right.
So we would do that, but we weren't a very practicing, like, fundamentalist Muslim family up.
Oh, you froze on me.
Should I jump back in, or?
Yeah, you kind of froze there. So
Okay.
yeah, you're talking about the Sunday school thing, and then it just kind of froze up. So
Okay, well, the point of that part was that originally my family were not practicing at all. But when I turned 11, I was put into a secondary school, or like a middle school, that was Islamic, and that was just for girls. And they propagate a subsect of Islam called the Tabligh Jamaat. So that was something that I became a part of, and I had a teacher who used to teach us like Islamic studies. It was meant to be like religion class where you learn about all religions, but we mainly just studied Islam. And
right.
I got into it. I thought it was a really interesting subject. I always had like an interest in religions and with God and like the different mythologies around it. So I got really, really into religion. I got really, really into Islam. And when I turned about 14, that's when I had a bit of a fundamentalist streak, because even though the Tabligh Jamaat, which was the subsect that this school was, they were pretty conservative as is, I found a lot of inconsistencies in the way that they practiced. And I mean, that's pretty complicated to explain just on one show, but they had a lot of inconsistencies that I didn't agree with. So I joined a different movement called the Salafi movement, or the Wahhabi movement. And I became a fundamentalist from there. And I actually brought that fundamentalism with me and preached it to the rest of my family. So my family became more and more conservative. Sorry?
How'd they take that when you were trying?
They became more conservative. So when I was 11, I actually started covering my face, and they noted that as something like really extreme. And I think most people would view it as something really extreme. But no one really warned me against it or said you shouldn't do that. So I continued doing that. And then as I became more and more practicing in Islam, members of my family slowly caught on and were like, oh yeah, we should probably be this religious as well. And the level of religious that I was that at 14, I had studied Arabic for about 3 or 4 years. I was listening to lectures that came directly from Saudi Arabia every Friday. I'd memorized portions of the Quran. I was really, really deep in my faith, and that's what I wanted. There's actually a blog that I opened back then as a 14-year-old, where I would post all the arguments I had online with the atheists and people that I would argue with. It's really cringy looking back, but I've left it up just because it was such a huge part of my life where I would like
Sure.
really beat down these atheists, and I didn't beat them down at all. They just put up with me. And I would post them on this blog. But yeah, I was really dedicated to not just practicing my faith, but also like proselytizing and preaching it, and telling people about it. I would watch lectures about Islam and science, and Islam and morality, and how Sharia is the perfect thing ever, and things like that. It was just something that was really near and dear to me. And a lot of things happened in my life which a lot of people like to attribute the reasons for why I left. So like my mother passed away in 2013. My father
Oh.
was extremely abusive. There's been a lot of things in my life where a lot of people like to say, oh, well, that's why you left Islam. But I was
Mhm.
still a very, very practicing Muslim while all those things were happening, because I believed it was all a test. I believed that this was God's way of like erasing my sins or allowing me to do more good deeds. So in my brain, I was comfortable with the idea of me believing in God despite all the things that like He was doing to me.
Right,
Um,
right.
it wasn't until really that so along those lines, the things that happened in my life, one of the things that happened was that I had to report my father because he was very physically abusive in our
Wow.
home. So I reported him, and my whole family turned against me, and they took the side of my father. And I thought,
Really?
well, yeah, they did. They still do. But
Oh man, I'm sorry you got to put up with that crap.
yeah, it's unfortunately, because our society is so patriarchally dominated,
Yeah.
especially in the subcontinent, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, because it's so patriarchal, that's just a theme in our communities where people will just take the side of the man without actually understanding what happened. So it became instead of it being like, oh, he did something terrible to you, it became, oh, you betrayed us by, having your father arrested. um and it was all valid. Like he wasn't beating me for any kind of specific, he wouldn't need a reason, but there wasn't a reason that he was doing that. He was just irrationally angry all the time.
Mhm.
So it just had to be, something had to be done, and my family knew about it for 2 or 3 years at least, because I would be on the phone to somebody every day talking about it. um and they did nothing, so I had to do something. And I did it, and I think where my mind really changed was when all these, like, up until that point, up until I had reported my father, I never really had close relations with anyone who wasn't a Muslim. Like my entire community was Muslim, all my friends were Muslim, my school, all Muslim, all the people, like even my neighbors, even if they weren't Muslims, I didn't have like a close relationship with them. But when I left my father's house and the police took care of me, the social workers took care of me, I finally was exposed, like even living in the UK, I was finally exposed to people who weren't Muslims. And
Mhm.
I had this image of them of being like really degenerative.
Like
It was
me.
terrible. But in my brain, I always pictured like people who weren't Muslims as being like really like sinful and degenerative. And for the first time in my life, I was like, wait, they're just normal people. They just do normal things, and they were way more helpful than the rest of my family who were Muslims, who practiced and things like that. And I was now on this questioning journey of being like, well, I'm a believer, and God's like given me this privilege of being a believer, and I'm meant to preach the message, but there's no denying that most of the people that he created were going to burn in hell because they weren't going to accept the religion. Islam isn't a dominating religion. Even if it was, it's not Islam, Christianity, Judaism. That's not how God looks at disbelievers. It's just believers and disbelievers. The
Uh-huh.
majority is always disbelievers.
Right. I
And
came
then
from
even with,
Judaism, just so you know.
oh, okay, I wouldn't
Yeah.
have guessed that.
No, nobody does. I was adopted. That's
Okay.
probably why. My birth parents were
Oh.
Catholic Christian types. So, and then I was given up for adoption. And of course, they ended up having my sister and got married anyways. I found them in 2000. So, or they found me.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Huh.
Sorry about that. Carry on.
That's interesting. Is everything okay?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, no, that's my phone. Sorry.
Okay. But being exposed to all, and even within Muslims, like because I was part of the movement that was the Salafi movement, we had a creed where the Prophet Muhammad had said that Islam would be divided into 72 sects, and all of those sects would be in fire but one. So even if you were a Muslim, you have a 1 in 72 chance of reaching paradise. Like your chance of being saved and being a true believer is so small compared to everyone else who's going to burn. And I couldn't reconcile that. I looked for a really long time. I asked, like, I would ring up on like television shows and ask them, like television imams, like television scholars. I would ask them questions about like predestination and how God knows everything and how most people are going to burn in hell. And I just never found a satisfying answer. Most of the time, it would just be like, oh, you shouldn't think about these things too much. Like, these questions aren't for you. God knows best. Those kind of answers. And I really didn't like it. I didn't like the idea of there being a God who knew everyone who was going to burn and then make them anyway and just kind of set them up to fail.
Yeah. That's the way I look at it too.
And that's kind of where I got out. And a lot of people are like, well, did you have like because a lot of ex-Muslims have like a Quranist phase where they don't follow the Hadith, or they have like a phase where they're not very practicing Muslims. I kind of went from a fundamentalist to not a Muslim anymore, like instantly.
Yeah.
I stopped praying, I stopped fasting. I was still living with family at the time, so I couldn't like take off my hijab, but I had in all aspects spiritual, I had completely renounced my faith, and that didn't do me any favors because unlike people who do things gradually, me going from 100 to 0 really kind of mentally messed me up. I had like a whole year where I was just repetitively having existential crises and not understanding what my life was about. And I finally got to a place of more or less mental stability, I think. But I still have those questions, like if there is no, like my whole thing was, well, if there is, because my purpose of life up until then was to get to paradise. That was the goal. That was
Right, sure.
to trade in a finite life for an infinite paradise. That was the goal. But the goal now was just, everything was just up in the air because there's nothing for me to go for. And on top of that, like, even though I went to a school here in the UK, I didn't go to university, so I didn't have a university degree. Up until I had left my father's, I only started working in 2016. I hadn't, so since I left what would be called high school or college here in the UK when I was 18, I didn't work for like 3 or 4 years, so I had no work experience. I didn't know what my life was about at all. And I had to go through all these hoops to figure that out. I'm still kind of figuring it out, and I think that's more or less normal from what people have told me.
I think so too. I think we go through life learning as we go. So
yeah. And I didn't watch a lot of atheist content. Even after I left Islam, I just felt like I didn't want to talk. I just didn't want to have the religion talk. Like, it was too painful for me because it was, I think a lot of people see religion as something very wishy-washy. For me, because of how interested I was in it and how deep I got into it, it was like a literal heartbreak for me to leave. So it was just very painful to revisit it at any point. So I wouldn't look into atheist content. I just thought, well, I'm going to hell anyways. I don't want to add to that. So it took me a while to get into atheist content, and then even then I wouldn't get into ex-Muslim content because it was, again, too painful for me. So I would watch like very soft-core atheist content. So I would watch like YouTubers who identified as atheists but didn't talk about religion very often. So like PewDiePie, for example, is an agnostic atheist, and that is the content that I got into, and he just made me laugh. I got into comedians. Like, I loved watching Bill Burr, George Carlin. Bill Burr, I still desperately want to be my dad because he makes me feel so at home.
He's good.
But I got into comedians, and then later on I got into atheist content. So I started watching the Amazing Atheist. I started watching Jacqueline Glenn's content. I still watch her content. And then slowly I went into ex-Muslim content, which there isn't much of. And there certainly isn't much of coming from a fundamentalist background. So that's kind of why my voice out there, because I feel as though the dominating conversation is like science and religion, and
Mhm.
I'm not a very scientific person. Science was never like my favorite subject. I find it interesting, but it wasn't something that I held in any way sacred. So it wasn't an argument that really mattered to me. Like even if someone came up to me while I was a Muslim and said, "Hey, the Quran is scientifically inconsistent with this," I would still be like, "Okay, well, that's God's word, so I'm more inclined to believe him than your science." So I think from a fundamental someone who was a fundamentalist, like the science argument wasn't very strong for me. Even the moralistic argument wasn't very strong for me because unlike a lot of Muslim apologetics who will say like, "Oh yeah, Muhammad married a 6-year-old back in his day because it was acceptable back then." I would not say that as a fundamentalist. I would just say it's allowed. He did it, so it's allowed. He's the one who sets the morality, so your morality doesn't mean anything. So it even from a moralistic point of view, it didn't matter. But what changed me was the fact that I cared about people and the fact that these people were going to burn in hell simply because they didn't believe in something. It wasn't because they were bad people. It wasn't because they weren't, you know, they were evil in any kind of way. It was just because they didn't believe. And that bothered me. And I really think that that is a strong argument, at least in my opinion, from someone who just wanted the best for people. It's one of the reasons why I was preaching, because I thought it was the truth, right?
Right. Sure.
Um, so that's why I decided to throw my voice out there, because there just wasn't content coming from a more emotional argument than, you know, as opposed to like very logical and consistent arguments. I think that the emotional argument is something that I make, and I'm often discredited for because a lot of people are like, "Oh, you're a woman, you're just emotional, we just need to give you
Right.
time, you'll come back to Islam." Um, and it really isn't,
Yeah.
because I
Not
feel
happening.
like, yeah. But I like the argument that I come from, and I think it adds to the greater sort of argument of like science and logic and morals and history and all of that stuff. So that's why I started doing it, and I don't know at what point I became an activist, but I guess that's what I am now.
I consider an activist anyone that speaks out against their former belief system to try and like what the reason I do what I do is hopefully it helps people find their way free of these kinds of beliefs, like people that are on the fence or something or having you know uh, thoughts about leaving, and then they see that there are other people out there that have done this and that this might help them make those decisions and let people know that they, you know, you're not alone. There's a community out here and people are always willing to reach out and help. So
Yeah.
there was a question
Um,
from one of the chat members for you. Since you found your way out of the belief system, do you find or do you value life more now than when you were a believer?
Oh, so much more. While my mother was ill, actually, I used to think, I never said it, and I really regret not saying it. I used to think like, because she had like a timer. They had told her how long she had to live. She had cancer.
Uh,
So she had like 6 months left to live. And in my brain, I was thinking, Mom, you should just go rob a bank. Like, you got 6 months left. And
what
I
are they
never
going to
said it, and I really should have, but like she was really, really devout from the like from all of the time that I knew her. So she just spent a lot of her time like praying and trying to be good to people, when really she should have just gone off the walls. She should have just like fucked off anyone who ever mistreated her, because
Yeah,
she was in a lot of senses she was like the kindest person ever alive, but because she was so kind, people walked over her a lot. And
sure.
I would have just, if the doctors gave me 6 months, I would have been making the most of that 6 months. In my
Sure.
opinion, if you get told how long you have left to live, that is a blessing. I would love to be told. If anyone knows, let me know. I value life so much more now, because I like, even if a minute is wasted, I get so upset because I know that's the only minute I'm gonna get. I'm not gonna get that minute back.
No.
Um, so there's certainly a greater value for life. Like the moral arguments that people used to make to me while I was a Muslim just make sense now. Because when I was a Muslim, they didn't make any sense, because my worldview was constructed in a way where
Sure.
only God was right.
Yep.
Okay, so like homosexuals need to be put to death. Yeah, of course, that's what God said. Like that was my ideal. He said it, so it's true.
You
But
clearly
now,
don't think that anymore, though,
because
right?
I sorry?
You don't think that anymore, though, right?
No, of course I'm bisexual, so of course not.
Okay,
Um,
there you
uh,
go.
but like now, the idea of putting someone to death for anything, like I don't think that capital punishment is valid for anything. Is just strange to me because that person is not going to get a second life to like answer for. So, for example, in the Islamic Sharia, the reason why people are put to death is to expiate them for that sin.
Sure.
So, for example, if they had committed adultery and there were four witnesses and they were put to death, they would be expiated for committing the adultery, so they wouldn't be punished in the afterlife. That is the reason why those laws exist.
Mm.
But since none of that exists anymore, like there is no God, there is no afterlife, the thought of putting someone to death for anything is just weird to me. And I like can't sometimes I can't understand how I used to think as opposed to how I think now. It's like I just shifted skins, like I'm a different person. Um
It's weird how that
and
happens, though. Because
sorry?
it literally, it's like a switch. It's weird how that happens. How you
Yeah,
have this one set of morals in your head, and you hit that switch, and it flips. It's like a
yeah.
weird thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think if I had like a gradual process, like making the apologetic arguments and being a more relaxed, progressive Muslim, if I had a transition, I'd be able to explain that a bit better, but I just can't. It was just that I thought one thing one day, and then the next day, as soon as I like rejected God, it just changed for me. Like I was just a different person, and I had different values, and suddenly everyone was just enjoy your life, your body. You put whatever you want into it, as long as you're not harming anybody or yourself.
Hmm.
It's, this is your life. You don't get any more than this.
That's right. It's the one you get. It's the one we know for sure we get. So don't waste it.
Yeah.
I always say, I used to have an expression that I used. I don't really use it as much as I used to, but I said life is like a story, like it's like a storybook. So make sure that your chapter is meaningful and memorable, and that's how you live on after you're gone.
I'm just, for me, I'm just ready for any experience now. Like even
Sure.
if it's a painful experience, I'm ready for it because it's life.
Yep.
There's nothing bad about living. If you're alive, then you're okay. You're doing okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Like
it's it's I don't want to use the term miracle, but seriously, if you think about the universe and the way it really is, what are the chances we're even here? I mean, everything is just so that we could be here. I mean, if you had to pick some sort of a god, you might as well use Jupiter because of that huge planet, we're here.
I think I think that the term God it definitely is like a superimposed explanation for everything. Like it
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
anytime you don't know something, you just say God and people
God of the
just turn
gaps.
around.
Yep. God of the
It's
gap.
not it's not a satisfying explanation, but it's an explanation that people use. And I really don't like that. I like my whole journey out of religion, like I didn't like the concept of God knowing everything and then setting up everybody to either pass or fail his rigged test. Um,
Yep.
but I like the concept, like I've had arguments about determinism and free will, and we could talk about that all day because there is no answer to that really. But I like to think that free will is something that you determine for yourself. You're determined to be free-willed, and you experience life however you want. And people will ask me, I don't know if they're philosophical questions, but they're just sort of think about things questions where they'll like have two options and be like, what would you rather go for? And it like someone asked me a few weeks ago, like if the world were to end tomorrow, would you kill yourself or would you want to see it? And I said, I want to see it.
Yeah. Yeah. I would
I
too.
want to see the world end. Why would I not want to see that? If there is an afterlife, I'm going to have the best story to tell.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jesus walked on water and like Moses parted the Red Sea, but I saw the end of the world. Like no one's going to have a better story than me.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like, you ever see the movie 2012?
No, that's a movie I've got lined up.
Because Woody Harrelson, when the big volcano in Yellowstone goes off, and he's just standing there like this, and it's everything just flies right at him, and that's it.
See, that would be me.
Yeah, that's what I said too. Right, watching the movie in the theater, I'm like, dude, that's so me when it happens.
Yeah. I think my theory of how the world is going to end is probably going to be Waterworld, and I want to be there. I want to see it. I want to lead people to like survive in a world that's just covered in water. Like I want to be. I've visualized it in my brain.
Yeah, I kind of want to know what people were eating, because there's no plants, no animals. There's all seafood. What if you're allergic to seafood? You're done.
Oh well, that's just Darwinism, isn't it?
Yeah.
You got to eat something.
Other people. You don't have many options, man.
No.
I mean, you got to consider everything would be done except for the fish and the people.
I have a theory. I have a theory that I think that killer whales are a lot more intelligent than we give them credit for, and the only reason that they're not on the top of the food chain is because they live in the water. If they were land animals, we'd be fucking dead.
You can say the same about octopi, like any of the cephalopods, actually, right? Because
like that's exactly what the fear is. Like if this world were just covered in water and we were just a seafaring people, we would be so fucked.
Probably, yeah. The good thing is there wouldn't be insects anymore, really, either. So no more annoying mosquitoes.
Mosquitoes.
Well, okay, yeah, I guess no, because they can't reproduce in salt water. It has to be fresh water. So
that's true. We would get rid of most of the insects. Maybe there'd just be crabs and crustaceans.
Yeah. The insects of the ocean. But you're right. Orcas are really intelligent. There are many of them in the area where I live, so you can actually see them off the coast sometimes.
Oh, right. They terrify me. I love them. I think they're beautiful, but they terrify me.
Really? Because they're actually quite docile towards people.
Well, up until it becomes, because I've seen orcas hunt down sharks.
Mm-hmm.
Like they don't need to do that, but they do.
Usually they do it when there's like babies involved, right? So they keep the sharks away from the young. Yeah,
but they also, like, I've seen them like hunt down a bunch of things. Like I'm very into aquatic. I'm Bangladeshi, if you didn't know. The sea is just for my people. But I'm really into like aquatic life and watching documentaries about like sea life and stuff like that. And I've watched a bunch of documentaries about sharks and a bunch like about orcas and killer whales and dolphins. And I would rather be put in a tank full of sharks than one of those, because if it ever became a question of either of those two becoming hungry, I could turn over a shark and it would suffocate. But those motherfuckers would eat me alive.
Yeah, probably. But I don't think you really have to worry about that. There have been, you were saying that orcas have been known to attack sharks, and they have actually done that in defense of humans.
Yeah, I've seen that too.
Right.
Maybe it's because we're mammals or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, it's one of my tribe. Right? We're the mammalian tribe.
That would be... I need to write like a story or something about this. I think that could be a really interesting prediction for the future. People just have it in their calendars. 2046 or something like that.
So you need these new calendars now. I ordered mine. I got to get the new one for this year, but... are you familiar with the YouTube channel Kurzgesagt? In a nutshell, they do a lot of really cool videos, scientifically based, that kind of thing. And every year they produce a calendar. They add right? Because this is like, if you think about, so the year 12,019 rather than 2019 adds on the 10,000 years or so of human agriculture from the beginning of civilization to now, right? So this is the time that we should be if we didn't have the Julian calendar.
Oh, okay. So not the Christian calendar.
Right. It's basically since human civilization started. They went from that point forward. So they just added an extra 10,000 to it.
Sweet.
Yeah, and it's got it's actually really nice, and they'll go through it, and they'll talk about different civilizations around the world, like say like Mayan people or the Human Era calendar, it's called, right? Or in Indonesia or Asia or stuff like that. All these little civilizations that started up, right? So
Awesome.
yeah, really, really cool.
I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, Chris Gesagt is a very, very good channel. Their things are all animated, and they bring up some really, really cool topics on their show.
Cool.
Anyways, carry on. Sorry. See, I told you we get a little sidetracked from time to time, which is okay.
It's okay. I mean, that was more or less like how I left Islam. If you have questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Sure. Well, my friend Mark already asked through one out there. If any of you guys do have a question, feel free to ask, and I will relay it over to Faye. Oh, hey, Prophet Azad, how you doing, man? What's more important? He says, agriculture or Jesus? Well, obviously Jesus. Come on. But I heard Jesus was a shitty farmer because he was a really good carpenter, apparently. So
wasn't he a shepherd or something?
I don't know, carpenter, shepherd. Nobody can make up their minds.
I mean, in Islam, we have an interpretation of Jesus. Let's call it that. We have an interpretation of Jesus.
He's like a prophet.
Yeah, he's a prophet. Yeah. And the story is that he could speak while he was a baby. I don't know if that exists in Christianity or not.
That I don't know. You and I are kind of both at a loss because I was raised Jewish and you're raised Muslim. So we don't in Judaism, we don't really talk about Jesus much. Because according to Judaism, he was considered a false Messiah.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Which is why they got together with Pontius Pilate and put the guy to death, apparently, because the ultra-religious ones figured he was some sort of false prophet.
Yeah, even back in those days, they weren't too happy about blasphemy. So.
Prophet Azad says he's never heard of that. So, but you know.
Okay.
Him being Jesus and all wouldn't surprise me if he could talk as a baby more than, you know, the goo goo gaga mama papa stuff. But
well, I mean, I don't know if Christians believe that he was born of a virgin. That's yes. Something to believe, right? But in our story, in the Islamic story, I really need to stop saying our story. In the Islamic story, she was a virgin. There was no Joseph in the picture at all. And towards like the end of her pregnancy, she was either exiled or she had to like spend some time outside like everyone. And when she brought the baby back to her tribe, people were accusing her of, you know, having extramarital relations because she has a baby. And then Jesus starts talking and defending his mother. That's the story.
That's something. Okay, now, see, I'm thinking. I don't think she married to Joseph at the time.
According
to they were married.
According to Islam, she wasn't married to anyone, but I don't know about the Christian story.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, because I mean, how does a virgin get pregnant anyways and stay a virgin? That's always kind of blew me away anyways.
Well, the story, according to Islam, the way that she gets impregnated is that Gabriel comes into her chambers and he tells her that God wants to give her a son, and then she says, "How can I have a son when no man has touched me?" And then Gabriel like blows some air through her sleeves and she becomes pregnant.
That's boy.
The story.
All right. Prophet Azad says she was engaged when she got pregnant, so not quite married. Betrothed, we'll say.
Right.
I like that word.
Did she also give birth in a stable or something?
A manger, yeah.
A manger, that's what it's called, yeah.
Yeah, that's how the story goes, anyways.
Yeah.
David, that's just gross. David Worley is also with us.
Hi, David.
You can see the chat, by the way. If you look up to your left, you'll see live chat there.
I'll see if it opens for me.
It should. I don't know. I've tried to respond too when I've been on other people's streams on StreamYard, and I can't actually respond to them. But
yeah.
David says Gabriel.
A lot of Mary jokes in the chat.
Gabriel comes into her chamber.
He blew some air in her sleeves and she got pregnant. That's the story. I don't know why that's in any way rational, but The way that, so I used to listen to a lot of like prophetic story like lectures because I found them really interesting, as opposed to a
Mhm.
lot of stuff like talking about inheritance in Islam is just so long. So like the story stuff was really interesting. And one of the people that I was listening, he was a radical scholar, so I'm not going to mention his name because that would just bring me so many problems. But he was telling the story, and he said that the reason why God chose to make like do this virgin birth thing is to close the cycle of creation. So God has been able to make man without parents, so Adam. He was able to make a woman from just a man, Eve. He was able to make normal people from men and women, and then this was proof that he could make a child from just a woman.
Right.
So that was the whole reason for it.
Right. I guess they had to find some way to make that sort of valid, I guess.
So it's so unnecessary, but they got to put it in.
Yeah, well, I guess because that story existed, they needed to figure out a way to make sense of it, so they made up another version of it.
Yeah. Also, the concept of Eve being Adam's daughter and then like them procreating all of humanity is just really weird.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that actually kind of blew me away when I found out about it is they talk about Adam and Eve in the garden, yet there were other people outside of the garden. Where the hell did they come from?
Well, in our traditions, we have humans and jinn.
Yeah.
So the other people would be jinn because jinn are also a free-willed creation,
Ah,
like human beings, but they're invisible and you can't see them and they cause mischief. That's
of course.
yeah.
Of course. Anytime something goes wrong, it was a fucking gin.
It was a fucking jinn, yeah.
You
Oh,
gins,
oh,
you tricky
you've
little
been feeling
bastard.
depressed for a few days? Go and get an exorcism. It's probably a gin. Why would you have a gin? Oh, probably because you poured some hot water somewhere and you pissed him off. I don't know.
Piss them
That's
off with
actually
hot
a
water.
thing. That's
Really?
actually a thing. Like you're not supposed to. So you can, at your own risk, pour hot water into a basin, but because gins like empty spaces, and it's never like told to us how big or small they are. Like there's a narration that says like if you interlock your fingers, then the gins can like sit between them, which is why you shouldn't do that.
Oh, weird.
and and if you don't like say a prayer before you go to sleep, they'll sleep in your nostrils or things like that. So at your own risk, if you pour hot water into a basin, you have the potential of angering a jinn and then have the potential of that jinn like possessing you.
Right, right. That's a good question. Blue collar heathen. What the hell was that movie with the gin? That was called The Wishmaster, I think.
There's quite a few movies with jinn in them.
I know, but this one focuses, I think, on one specific jinn, and he
Okay.
goes around and offers the wishes, like some of the folk tales talk about. And it says, "Be careful what you wish for," because there's one guy you end up turning into a sheet of glass, and he said he
Yeah,
wanted.
I'm not sure where at what point jinn started granting wishes because it's not an Islamic thing for sure.
Right.
Um, it might just be like an Arab folklore thing. But yeah, I don't know. They appear in Supernatural. That's just my guilty pleasure show.
Oh, Supernatural. Yeah, my roommate really digs that show as well.
It's such a wasteful show. There's so many fillers in that show, but it's just really easy to watch. Like you can just have it playing in the background and you know exactly what's happening.
Yeah,
Um, it's a
yeah.
good show to watch if you just want to waste some time.
I watched, I think, the first couple of seasons. Then I just got sidetracked onto other things, and I kind of never went back. But I do plan on binge watching the whole thing from start to finish. They film that in my city, by the way. It's filmed right here where I
Oh,
live.
cool.
I see
Cool.
them. I've seen their set locations many times, and that car that they drive, I've touched it. I'm like, this is the best
That
car ever.
car,
It's
that
fucking
car is
awesome.
beautiful.
Yeah,
That car is beautiful.
yeah.
But I think the last season is the current season that's going on, so you can binge watch it to the end once it's finished.
It's done at the end of this season, is it not?
Yeah, this season that's currently going on is the final season.
Right. John Peterson wants to know, do jinns wear tunics, like jinn and tunic? Oh my goodness.
Oh my gosh.
John,
As far as I'm aware, I don't know if they wear clothes or not.
Gin and tunics. Sounds, that's just silly. Yeah, sorry, IQ. I know the show was originally scheduled for later today, but Faye has some stuff she has to do later today, so we decided to bump it a lot earlier so she could get her on with her day after this. So
yeah.
That's why. And I did put a note in the Discord, by the way. Oh, also, I do have a link this time to the Discord if you guys do want to join it. Bob Smith likes my shirt. Yay, save the planet.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I've pissed off a few people in my neighborhood with this one. That's offensive.
What is your stance? What is your stance on like global warming? Are you for mitigation or adaptation?
For global warming?
Yeah.
I don't really call it global warming because global warming is just one of the aspects of climate change. It can have an opposite effect during wintertime, right? So it can actually become colder in the winter, which we've noticed here. We've been getting a lot of, I'm on the West Coast in Vancouver, and our winters here are generally pretty easy. We might get a couple of inches of snow for like 2 weeks of the year, whereas the rest of Canada just gets blanketed in this stuff. But we've had the odd seasons where it's come up to my waist. Like I literally...
Really?
Yeah. And I couldn't even drive my car or tow truck when I was driving a tow truck. I couldn't even get out of my driveway, for crying out loud. This way back in the day. But every time we get those big dumps, it seems to get worse. Every time an extra half a foot is added, it seems, or it's colder, and the snow will freeze here because we are on the coast. So of course there's moisture, and when our snow starts to melt and it gets really cold, it literally turns into a sheet of ice. And driving around here during that time of the year is like watching cars in the ice capades. They're all just spinning around on the roads and stuff.
Oh no!
Oh yeah, it's just crazy.
We don't really get snow in London.
No,
we've gotten over the last few years. We've gotten snow, but not in winter. We've gotten it around like February, March, so almost in spring.
Weird.
And we've had really, really hot summers here. I mean, snow by no means up to the waist. We don't get that much snow, but we've been getting snow. And we didn't, like, as a kid, I don't remember us getting that much snow. So there's definitely been a change. And I think it's going to be more consistent. Our summers have gotten so much warmer than they were.
Yeah.
Which is just frustrating for me because I enjoy the cold. You saying that you get up to the waist snow is like a dream for me. Like I can't imagine that. I want that.
Well, the snow is fun. Snow is fun up to a point, but when it gets up to your waist, it's kind of annoying because you can't do anything.
No.
Sure, you could jump into it and pretend you're swimming in a snow ocean, but that's about as good as it gets. Also, Prophet Azad was saying that Prophet Azad lives in Alaska, so he's a good meter for how things are going on up north for this climate change. And he says Alaska is pretty much melting and eroding more and more every year, which I know, yeah. One of the biggest things I think that we have to worry about with climate change, especially the warming part, is up north here in Canada and probably other places as well that are in the northern hemisphere anyways, have what they call permafrost. And there's a lot of biological entities that are frozen up in that permafrost, and some of them could be quite harmful. And there's also a lot of methane trapped there. So if that stuff were to suddenly start to thaw out, then that's going to get released into our atmosphere, and there could be some biological agents that are not good for people, and there could be extra methane being added to our atmosphere that could also change, the breathability of our atmosphere. So there's a lot of mystery yet. Well, not so much mystery because they take core samples and shit of that stuff all the time, so they do know what's trapped in there. Yeah, and Zod was just saying permafrost is melting, which is breaking houses and bending roads in some places. So it could do structural damage as well. Yeah.
That's insane. See, I feel like all our problems are tiny compared to that, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah,
Why
but
is
that's
no
just
one talking about that?
humans. We focus more on our own little personal issues than we do on the bigger ones, which is why we get so much denialism, anyways.
Oh, which is why we're all going to be standing at the end of the world with our arms outstretched like this, just in surrender.
Yeah, yeah. And then like I have a friend who's one of those alien believers, right? And he says, "Oh yeah, the world will come to an end, and then all of a sudden these giant ships will show up in our atmosphere, and they'll start beaming up all the worthy people to start." Like, dude,
Is he a
that'd be really
Scientologist?
no, but he's not. No, he's not religious. He's an atheist like me, but all atheists have in common, people, is the non-belief in deities. Some of
Oh no, I
us
know.
have crazy ass ideas.
Some of us are still crazies. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, that's funny. That's really funny.
I know. I said that would be
Like,
awesome, actually, but
he just thinks that aliens are like situational. They just appear.
yeah, and they're all benevolent or something. If a race like that is going to go throughout space like that, I think the chances are, like,
They want something.
yeah, they're after something, right?
No, I
So,
reckon that if there are aliens out in the universe, I don't think they're any better or any worse than us. I reckon they'd probably be the same as
yeah,
us. Like not in terms
well,
of like technological advance, I think that's a different conversation. But in terms of like behavior, I would say that they were probably similar.
there. I'm sorry, I muted myself because I had to blow my nose. Like I said, I'm still dealing with that cold there. Um, yeah, I don't know if I'd say they're going to be exactly like us because it just depends on how evolution went on their planet. So,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I mean, we're the only sample of what life is like in a community or social civilization so far that we know of. So this is the only one we have to use as a judgment point, right, for something like that. Yeah. So who knows, man? But that's kind of why I like Star Trek, because it gives you an idea of what possible other civilizations, like you get the Ferengi that are all monetarily based, right? And everything's about luck and latinum and shit like that, right? And then you get the Klingons, which are a warlike race, which I would say we would probably be, because let's face it, we're not exactly a peaceful planet. We are beating the crap out of each other on the daily. And Tyson said they'd probably be so different from us in terms of intelligence we couldn't even relate to them, which is I agree with too, because it depends on how much more advanced than us we are. Like if they've been around for like an extra million years longer than us, then they
would be on a different level. You're right. I don't know. I think that even in shows like Star Trek, I think this sample is based off other communities we've had on this planet.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that was part of why he did that. Yeah, political statements and stuff like that, right? Like I think back to that one episode with the guy that was half white, half black, right? Like obviously that's a political statement from the time.
Yeah.
Right. So
much.
Yeah.
It's really on the nose, but yeah.
I read an article actually recently said that aliens could very well already be here, but we just don't know, because if they're sufficiently advanced, they wouldn't have to do any space travel themselves. They could send out microscopic machines to check all the planets out. And there could be a microscopic machine crawling around right on my room here somewhere, and I wouldn't even know about it.
Isn't that like part of the lizard people theory? Like
I don't know.
Like it's been a running meme, but I think some people seriously believe that Mark Zuckerberg is a lizard.
Yeah, well, I don't think so. I hear that people talk about that.
That theory is very similar to this one, though, where they think that these people are aliens, but they're hiding in people suits.
In people suits. No, I mean, these are little tiny little machines which would be we're doing that right now. It's just our machines aren't that tiny. We've got rovers and we've got satellites that circle planets. How do we know that they aren't sending out little microscopic machines into other worlds just to check them out by the millions?
Wouldn't surprise me, honestly.
I mean, it would save you from having to space travel, right? Space travel is hard.
We're so caught up in our own problems that we wouldn't notice them even if they were here.
So. Yeah, I know. We wouldn't even know. It's an interesting topic, though, and I myself personally believe that the chances that there is life out there somewhere is fairly high, because if you think about just how vast our universe is, there's got to be at least a couple more worlds out there, because I know that at the same time that our universe is so huge and vast, and the chances of life arising are actually kind of slim, really. But in the trillions of the trillions of galaxies that they at least know of out there, there's got to be at least a couple other planets. Whether they're more advanced than us or less advanced than us is the other question. So,
well, it just depends how long they've been around.
Right.
And another question could be like, what if there was a civilization on this planet, but they like fucked it up as well, and their planet is just the husk of the planet it used to be?
Yeah. But where did they go? That's what I want to know.
They all died.
Oh, I see.
But yeah, I mean, I feel like some people, and these aren't educated people, they're just people spitballing ideas. I do that sometimes, where I'll just throw an idea out there and then get wildly roasted by the internet. But there are people who said that that's a possibility for Mars, that Mars inhabited life at some point because they found bacteria there or something. But the people
they do know water is
Mars,
there. They know it had an atmosphere, thin as it was. They did have one. Life like we know it, unlikely, but at least bacterial.
That's what people are thinking, that maybe there was life on that planet and then they fucked up the planet.
There'd be evidence. There'd be evidence of it somewhere, and they just haven't found any.
Yeah.
There's pretend evidence that people like to think they see, thanks to pareidolia.
You know what? I love pretend evidence. It just allows me to think. Like, I was watching a few videos around flat earthers, and I know all of it is just pretend. And someone threw out a concept that if flat earthers started a show where they like looked for the edge of the world, it would be a never-ending show. That would have 1 million series, because they'd never be able to find it. And,
shouldn't we have found this by now? We've circled the globe. Oh, wait a minute.
But I was watching like a couple, no, I wouldn't call them documentaries, let's call them docu-series of these people who were talking about the flat earth concept and why they believe in it. And I saw all their diagrams, and none of them match each other. They're all different diagrams of what a flat earth looks like. And they're like selling these things, and idiots are buying them. But there was one guy who was trying to explain like the concept of having a flat earth is not necessarily just trying to be a contrarian. And I do think to a greater extent there are a lot of people who just want to be different. But most of the people who believe in it are also like zealots. They're like religious, and they believe in that stuff because the Bible says it, or the Quran says it, or whoever, somebody said it, and they believe in it. And it's this idea that, and the reason why they don't think that other planets are flat as well is because the Earth is special, because God created it that way. I don't know why he would, but he created it that way, and that's what makes them feel special. It's a very egocentric as well as geocentric universe. So it's interesting. I think that that's a very interesting way to wrap your head around things. Like, all the science says the Earth is, spherical, but I think the Earth is flat, so it must be.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. My friend Critical Cripple pointed out something I completely forgot. Von Neumann probes is what I was talking about, microscopic machines that go around in the universe. And he also raised another valid point, which I agree with to some degree. However, he says that the chances of another civilization still being alive at the same time that we are is pretty slim, at least as far as we know. We can be completely wrong, too. I mean, there could be literally thousands of other civilizations out there. But do they have the technology to come and see us? I don't know.
I don't know if it would ever be a good idea to find out if there was another civilization, because knowing humans, we would just want to go over there and just
kill them.
Pocahontas.
Right. Yeah. It's in our nature.
Like Avatar, that shit. Like just kill, destroy the blue people's magic tree. Like that's what we would do.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we do that to each other.
I think we're fine just fucking each other up. I think that's okay. Like as soon as we go into space where you can literally just disappear.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
for
think that
good.
becomes a problem. um,
There's another thing though that I recently, well, maybe a few years ago, found out about. Is you know how in our solar system we have a habitable zone around the
yeah,
center of our solar system. Well, apparently the universe also has that too. Like in the mass web of, there's a certain area where life is more probable in the universe than there is on the outskirts or closer into the center. So it's like
but
it
how
has
would
its
they know
own
that?
habitable zone. These are in these areas is where they're finding planets that could have life. They're finding Earth-like planets in these types of areas within the
That's so
universe.
cool.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. And I watched like I've forgotten the name of the movie. It had like it wasn't a very popular movie. I think it was like a German movie, and there was a concept of where they were like sending people to this other planet, but they had to be given like this drug, so that they could adapt to that like that atmosphere quicker. And instead, what happened was is that the ship went off course or something like that,
Mhm.
and instead of adapting to the planet, all the people started adapting to the ship.
Oh,
Um, and they became like these crazy demon. I've forgotten what it's called. It was such a good movie
I
as well.
think I know what you're talking about. Oh boy. Yeah, I'll think on that for a second.
They
I
like
might.
become like these crazy like zombie demons where they start eating each other and shit.
Yeah.
Like it's a really good movie.
Yeah, and the name I think is no shit. Isn't
Fuck.
Is Samuel Jackson in that one?
No, a different black actor is in it though.
um, shit. Lawrence Fishburne. Event Horizon? Is that what it's called?
No, not Event Horizon, although that movie's really good as well. Um,
Pandorium?
it's gonna drive me insane. Huh?
Pandorium?
Sorry? That's the one.
Pandor?
I think that's the
Pandorium.
one.
Yeah, Brant. My friend Brant just posted that one out.
Thank you.
The
That's
ship
the
was
one.
underwater.
That's I really like the movie.
Oh, and it ends up that the ship was underwater the whole time.
Yeah, so it was underwater on that planet. But
Yeah.
I thought that was a really interesting sci-fi concept that they had. I want to watch more movies like that. I want to think about that to escape.
Yeah, it's kind of neat. There's all sorts of really cool movies about what could happen out there.
Mm.
I kind of like Alien myself.
I mean, we are to other aliens.
Yeah, exactly. We are aliens too, from another AI racist or another species point of view. Anyways, all right. Well, do you want to jump into an after party? Are you cool with that for a little bit, Faye?
We can do a little bit of an after party, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you don't have to stay for the whole thing. Like you can just come in for 10, 15 minutes and say hello to a few people.
Sure.
And then you can go about your day, and then I'll just hang out and amuse these people for a little bit longer. I usually do one for about an hour-ish at a time. So just like the chats. All right. Is that cool? Okay. So what I'll do is I will send you a new link and we'll jump into that. I'm just going to go have a quick cigarette and take a quick pee because coffee, this is my second one. So normally it's beer I do during these things, but it's a little early to be drinking beer right now.
It's 10 a.m. where you are. So.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's almost 11. So I could
Okay.
say, well, I'm close enough to lunch or I could crack a beer now and I'm almost out of coffee. So it might just happen.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. I have a clock actually at work that is all fives. So it works for me.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to thank you very much for chatting with me today. It was good to hear a story. And this is another reason I do these is to get to know the community that I've quite fallen in love with and gotten to be a part of. And people actually accepted me into the community, which blew me away right off the bat anyways. So
why would they accept you?
I don't know. I'm an oddball, I guess, but I guess we all are really in our own special way.
Well,
But yeah, thank you so much, Faye, for joining me today. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. And
it's been really nice chatting with you as well. Often when I talk about like the whole deconversion story, it's usually like a really serious stream.
mhm.
Throughout the whole thing, it's really difficult to get like 1 or 2 laughs in there. I think this is the first time I've talked about coming out of Islam and not crying about it. So that's good.
Well, I mean, you were Muslim for years, so of course it's going to have an emotional effect on you because you were in that mindset once, and now you're in a different one. So you looking back, it's going to trigger stuff, obviously.
Yeah.
Which is why I always tell people, you know, we're all here for you. If you're ever in those moments where you need to reach out and just chat for someone or with someone, definitely, for sure. And I always try to let people know that as much as possible. There's some good people in our community too that do actually give a shit about us and others.
Oh, there really is, and I really appreciate those people.
For sure.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun. It's been really fun.
Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I did myself, and it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. I've been looking for, like I told you last night, I was trying to get to sleep early so I could get up early and go get my breakfast and get shit going, and I couldn't sleep. I'm like, Faye's so awesome. Really? I get to chat with Faye. Yeah, I was kind of, I was probably up an extra hour than I should have been, but I even tried listening to some ASMR to put me to sleep, but that didn't work either.
ASMR freaks me out. I can't listen to ASMR. That would keep me up.
It's the ones that I listen to are the stuff with like the rain falling or the
not like the people talking and eating and shit.
No, that's kind of weird. The eating stuff is weird. I don't mind the odd whispered bedtime story, that kind of thing, because that kind of brings me back to my childhood with my mom reading stories to me.
I have my ears are really, really sensitive. So anytime, even if someone whispers in my ear, I just get so triggered immediately. Like I feel like my instant reaction is like needing to punch something. Like I can't have it near my ear. And I think that's to do with like how I grew up as well. Like I was very, very conscious of the things that I heard. And also I'm like I don't want to say part blind, but my eyesight is pretty terrible. So my ears are like out here, really. So no one can come close to me. I just hate it.
Okay. Well, I'll keep that in mind if we ever run into each other. I'll lean right in there and go, hi. I won't do that, I promise. So what do you think? You think you might come out to the Faithless Forum this year?
Where is the Faithless Forum?
Well, yeah, it's usually in Dallas, so it's a little bit of a wait.
I know Zara K is going to go down to Dallas to the Faithless Forum.
Yeah, she piped in through Skype last year, I think. So.
No, I think she's actually going to go there. But funny story. You asked me. I don't know if this was on stream or off stream. You said that I don't sound British. I dated an American for like 2 or 3 years, and my visa got repeatedly refused by the American government. So I don't know if I'm allowed in the US.
Well,
and on top of that, I don't know if I could afford going to Dallas next year. Is that next year? Yeah.
Yeah, it's usually in April. Oh, hang on.
Going to the US is like $1,000, right? From the UK.
Give or take. Yeah. Depends on how early you get a ticket. Because if you get tickets earlier, you can, as long as you know the dates that it's going to happen, you can then book a flight earlier, and you usually get a bit of a discount if you book early. Yeah, that's what I did last year.
I'd have to think about it, because we went to Amsterdam this year for celebrating Descent at Diwali. They had a big ex-Muslim event there, and a benefactor had actually paid for my ticket to go there. I could not afford to go there. So, I mean, if anybody's willing to pay for my flight, if any Zionists are out there funding ex-Muslims.
Zionists, stay away from those big fucking whack jobs too.
No, it's a running joke. Like, Muslims seem to think that we're being paid off by Zionists and white supremacists. I wouldn't be living here if I was being paid off, is all I'm saying.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's a running joke in our community.
I've got a couple of relatives that are Zionistic, we'll say.
I don't know too much about it. I don't get involved in the Israel-Palestine conversation. I don't want to get involved.
I lived in Israel for 2 years.
I have enough problems all on my own to not deal with that.
Mind you, when I lived in Israel, it was not as bad as it is today. I was good friends with many Palestinian people that was over there, and it wasn't the same as it is today. But mind you, this was the early '80s, so it was quite different.
Every year, it just seems to get worse and worse. I don't even know who's who's really to blame anymore. I feel like there's faults on both sides.
Yep,
Um,
of course.
but again, I don't know enough to really comment on it, and it's it's just a tragedy. Like, it needs
It
to
is.
just stop.
Yeah. It's been going on in that area for thousands of years, regardless. Everyone wants a claim to that land. There's actually a cute little YouTube animation video. I don't know if I call it cute, but it says, "This land is mine," it's called. And it just shows every civilization that's come in to claim it after the next one and kill them off, take it over, kill them off, take it over, kill them off, take it over.
But why though? Is it just because of the holy sites?
I guess. You got
But
to think
that's
about
so
that.
pointless though.
But it's quite near the cradle of civilization, as we call it nowadays, anyways, right? So it's that area was the first areas that were colonized by people.
I mean, but do they have like any resources? Like oil?
They do a little, not quite
They
as
have a
much
little bit
like in
of
Saudi
oil?
Arabia,
Because
but
like, see, like, that's what I thought. Like, I thought that people, if people were gonna fight over something, people would be fighting over Saudi Arabia because they have so many resources. But I mean,
mm,
not so many. They have a resource that's very valuable right now. But people fighting over a holy site is
I
like,
know, ridiculous.
it's like killing people over a stone, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's like everyone's got a favorite toy, but everyone else wants it.
It's so tragic, and like we can sit here and laugh about it, but people are actually dying for shit like that.
Yeah, yeah. You know, and it's what's funny is I've heard apologists use that in their argument. Well, you know, it must be true. People wouldn't die for things that aren't true. Yeah, people do it all the
People
fucking
have
time.
people have died for shit that's untrue, and
Oh yeah,
like we're that stupid.
yeah, yeah. Like,
We are
hello,
that stupid.
Heaven's Gate. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that one, but Heaven's Gate,
Oh, those
suicide
heavenly
for that shit.
drink the Kool-Aid people,
Yeah,
the Manson family,
yeah.
like
Don't sell
insane.
your fellow human short. We'll die for all the stupid things. Before we go, if I don't read this off, Russ is going to give me a hard time about it. But Russ, who's frustrated atheist, who you know,
Okay.
always does fun facts then they're usually nonsense. But here's a fun fact. It's a slash hashtag Faye fun fact. Faye didn't actually leave Islam. Islam took one look at how much of a badass she is and ran in the opposite direction.
Oh, oh, I'm gonna steal that.
There you go. It's there. There you go, Russ. I read it for you. Quit whining. All right. Well, let's get into the after party because it's now we've gone 10 minutes over just about, so which is cool.
Yeah.
It just means we
All
just
right.
kept wanting to talk. Anyways, let's do this. Give me a few minutes of a break here, and then I'll send you a nice fresh new link, and we'll be joined by a few people and
Okay.
talk for a little bit longer, and then you can carry on with your day, and then I'll keep them entertained for the rest of the hour, and then go on about my day.
Okay.
Even,
Cool.
even though my friends my younger friends still want me to come out and play some Yu-Gi-Oh later, so I don't know if I'm going to do that. Though.
That sounds like fun.
It is. It's a lot of fun. My ex-wife's kids got me hooked on it, and I've just been playing ever since.
I used to play as a kid. I don't see myself playing Yu-Gi-Oh now, but I mean, it's fun. It is fun.
I'll bring some decks with me next time we're at an event.
Oh, if I come to Faithless 4 and bring Yu-Gi-Oh cards, that would be amazing. If
I
atheists were playing Yu-Gi-Oh.
Well, Surus brought them last year, but I didn't bring mine, so we had to do it on the phone. We were playing Yu-Gi-Oh!
Do
Duel
you
Links.
have like a deck, like the thing?
No, my buddy's kids had them, and I tried to put one on. They don't fit me. My wrists are fucking huge, right? So they don't fit me at all. And basically, it'd be like the Iron Giant trying to wear a little gaming thing on his arm. That would just look ridiculous.
I mean,
But,
it's cheap. I had one as a kid.
yeah,
I was that kid. I was just like the annoying kid that wanted all the gimmicky like Pokemon shit.
Awesome. It's time to duel. And the machine comes out.
I also had Beyblades, which were just the most gimmicky shit that came out in like the years that I was a kid.
Yeah.
they're just like on a zip wire. You just go and it just spins around. Like that was the toy. It was a spinning like disc.
Awesome. Yeah, well, it was often the weirdest, stupidest, dumbest toys that amuse the shit out, like a slinky, a fucking spring that you roll down the
I
stairs.
love
I can play
those
with that
things.
shit forever.
It's just like I think it's like pattern finding brain just has like an endless pattern to work with.
Yeah,
So it's just you just want to sit there and watch that all day.
yeah.
I mean kids have stupid toys now. They have fidget spinners and stuff. I had one
Oh
in my
my
room.
god,
I don't
yeah.
know what happened to it. But
I didn't.
yeah, I think it's just a case of your pattern finding brain just being really interested in one pattern, just going over and over and over again. So yeah.
Battle tops. Blue collar heathen. My kids had battle tops. Oh, those are called Beyblades, by the way. Anyway,
Yeah.
I know too much about toys at 53. But that's why I have my teacher says I'm not like most teens. I'm in my 50s. Anyway.
Oh, I teach teenagers. So I love just doing kid stuff. That's just my thing.
Yeah,
That's why I talk like one, I dress like one, I behave like one.
me too.
And people don't get it. They're like, you should act your age. And I'm like, what do you mean? What are you trying to say? Um,
Age is
it
here.
age is here.
Like I said, growing
But
old is
let me
obscure.
join you in the after show.
Yeah,
Because this
yeah.
is gonna go on forever from the
I
sound
know,
of
right?
it.
No, I know you're easy to talk to, right? So it's and even with the age difference, we still have a lot of commonalities, which I think is really cool.
Well, yeah,
And
I think when you put two weirdos in a box,
weird things can happen. All right. Well, thanks again for joining me today, Faye. And thanks everyone for tuning in and hanging out with us. I hope you guys enjoyed the show as much as we did. We are going to do an after party. If you are interested in joining the after party, remember I only have room for 4 with both Faye and I in there because StreamYard, unlike Google Hangouts, you can have 6 people maximum, not 1.5 million. But anyway,
yeah.
I'll send you a link through Twitter or Facebook if you're not on Twitter. Just let me know. I saw your quote there, John. There is a link to the after party, I believe, on my Twitter post underneath the initial post for this. And I think IQ will throw a link to the after party in the Discord. I won't be in the Discord today, so you can look for it there, or just send me a message on Twitter and I'll give you one. Anywho, it depends if you want to come in or watch, so it depends on the link there. All right, so as I always say at the end of these things, thanks again, everyone. And like the late, great Christopher Hitchens once said, it's called faith because it's not knowledge. And we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.